This is Kevin Pruitt with another episode of Clear Waters Podcast, a podcast of clarity in an otherwise murky world. And have my co-host Nick Petros on the line with me today. And we have a very special guest, a mutual friend, Peter Selby from Down Under. Peter, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here.
So share a little bit about Peter Selby with our listening audience.
Sure. So I'm one of these guys that are lucky enough to earn a living out of helping other people. And I've had a few years corporate, sort of 30 odd years corporate background, and moved into business consulting back in 2008 and currently lead a international management consultancy called Business Drivers. And we help primarily based Sydney and Auckland and into the UK, helping companies really make more profit and growth strategically in just about any market, really across a range of size of businesses, and helping those companies that really are left to fend on their own, or certainly not work with the large consulting houses, and bring them some solid IP and process around their businesses. So it's been a fun ride, and we get to help these people on a daily basis, and that's really good working with the people to do it. It connects us with people all around the world, you know.
Well, Peter, we've had the luxury of chatting before. We were on another podcast called Rising Tide Startups, and I encourage you to look up Peter's episode on Rising Tide Startups. It's a much longer story than we'll hear tonight, but we're going to really focus on this podcast to really around the word clarity or transparency. So, you mentioned you got 30 odd years of experience. So kind of draw out maybe a story that really kind of epitomizes the idea of bringing clarity in a murky situation.
Sure. And look, that is exactly what you do when you apply all this, when you apply business best practice into companies. It's all about giving them clarity, be it through process or technology. And quite often companies are trading and not getting the best margin they could be, or not getting the growth they should be, because they don't see the whole story. And I'll give you an example. We work with a company up in northern Queensland which is a power distribution company, and they work in, you can imagine a power line running from the problem in Australia is you've got very few end users and a lot of mileage to cover. So people need to get a lot out of their assets, and they're running power lines in quite hospitable places. And the thing about northern Queensland, of course, is they have a tornado season as well. So you've got the arid dry to the horizontal rain all in the same bunch of assets. So quite an extreme bunch of measures. And this particular company had tried to run some improvement process themselves, and were trying to rationalize their demand for power poles in this particular case. So they were looking at the amount of power poles they use every year, and can we streamline that? Can we hold less inventory and try and cut some cost, which is a great thing to do. But of course, they only had half the picture, which was this is how many power poles we use in a year. So their solution to that was, well, let's divide that by 12 and tighten up on our monthly orders, which was great. But the missing element there, of course, is they use all their power poles in about 2 months when they all blow over with the tornado season. So the rest of the year they don't use them. So what happens, of course, they've now got this steady, or they did have this steady stream of power poles coming in every month, which don't get used. So they lie on the ground and start rotting away, or rusting, depending on what type of power line it is. And then, of course, when they need them all in the 2 month period, they don't have them. So it's a classic case of only having half the story in a business. And when you unravel behind it, they're not only the amount they use, but the demand patterns with it. Suddenly, as a light bulb goes on, and they realize it's a bit harder to tie the whole thing together. And then you can work with their suppliers, of course, and get the cost out. But I mean, that's just a small example. But we see it just about everywhere, where companies don't have a full view of what they're trying to do, and they're trying to, with all the best intentions, do the right things. But because everything's not connected and they can't see all of the data and the reasons for the data, they can't make the key decisions they need to make.
Well, this is maybe a ridiculous question, but Is there a reason that those power cables couldn't be buried underground, or is this like an ecological reason? This is not, it doesn't scale? It seems like
It's
to me, if I keep
cost.
blowing over my power poles every year, I would say we got to have a different plan.
So sure, let's put them all underground, and that's a great idea. But when your trench is 2,500 kilometers long, it starts to
Exactly.
cost a lot of money.
Yeah, you've dug the
So
Nile River. That's right.
yeah. I mean, and you know, it's just like the US. The tornado is in a common. When you look at it from outer space, the tornadoes all go in an alley that's the same every year. So why don't you stop building things in that alley? Well, that's great, but the tornado never strikes in the same place twice, does it? You know, so it's a big alley. So you know, they have to get power across Australia somehow, and they have to deal with all these issues. But sure, there's ways around all that stuff, you know. But you can't design a solution without understanding the problem in detail.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
this might be a little too deep of a question for a quick discussion, but you know, we've talked a lot about the process for diagnosing these things before they get into operations, and a mistake becomes something that's really catastrophic. You know, just a couple minutes on how you guys approach figuring out where the problems are so they can be solved.
Yeah, that's a great question, because that absolutely is 80% of the time the problem is not understanding what the whole problem. So if you think about, and especially now, businesses now are becoming, or markets generally are more dynamic than they ever were. If you think of, without getting into too much detail here, but if you think about the whole sort of fourth industrial revolution, where everything is now big data and it's all connected and it's talking over the internet, things are moving 10 times faster than they ever were. And then you put a pandemic on top of that. The businesses are changing daily, literally daily. Markets are changing daily. And unless businesses can focus on what's going on a daily basis, they're going to fall behind. And companies just don't run that way, right? So most businesses run on a yearly planning cycle that's broken into quarters, and then they review their performance each month and make decisions. Well, that used to work. It doesn't work anymore, because you're now making decisions that's 6 weeks old. If you then take that into improvement, like you've just talked about, first of all, you've got to understand everything that's going on. And because it's changing daily, there's a lot more to that than you might think. And you can't run any sort of resilient process improvement without having a really holistic view of everything that's happening right now. Now, one of the best ways to do that, of course, is to get some data into the business that is foolproof and more immediate, be it real time, but certainly immediate. It's visual, so you can see what's going on. But also, you've got to understand the interactions between all the management systems and how effectively they're working across the enterprise. That is a fundamental piece of understanding that needs to take place before you start pulling change levers. And it's the old 80-20 rule. 80% of businesses try and rush in and get some change to get some benefit without fully understanding the implications of that. And the example I gave you of the polls is a classic example of that. But I mean, it's one of thousands.
I know
Does
that.
that answer your question?
Yeah.
I know that you and Nick have you know, I think off camera we use the term mad scientists, so we kind of created some, you know, have a laboratory kind of environment here. But so what are some things that you all have kind of worked on, just you know, maybe at a 50,000 foot level, that says this is how we're going to address this problem of making sure that we have good information on the leading edge of this, so we can make, you know, decisions that are data driven, that are real time?
Yeah. So Peter's always the smartest man in the room, which is why I'm jumping in here.
Speak
No,
early.
no. So I mean, Dash is fairly young, and Business Drivers has been around for a while, and you know, Peter's been coaching folks all over the world, some massive organizations, all the way down to small businesses. So a lot of what we've been doing is you know, us, the Dash team, learning a bit about how Business Drivers operates, and slowly bringing the two together, because I think what we lack at Dash is the operational process to take the things that we're able to help businesses discover within their organization and turn it into practice. And the latter is what Peter's really cornered the market on. I mean, they've built something they can plug into basically any business and help streamline operations, identify pitfalls before they happen, and see how it all needs to come together before you even start. I think it's something really unique, and it's been awesome to learn about from him firsthand.
Yeah, look, and the other powerful thing for companies here is the opportunity that's normally deeply hidden in the organization will pay for any of the issues that they need to solve, right? So when you bring people in to help you, or you plug in a platform that enables you to suddenly see your business visually, there's already the money in the company to pay for that, because they're losing it by not realizing the margins they could be realizing, or the sales they could be realizing. And I think the power of the process is putting those two things together, is to really understand what's going on deeply before you change anything, but also it enables you to more deeply drive outcomes than you could before, by mixing good practice with good data management, and being able to access data more immediately. Decisions basically need to be made more immediately in business if they're going to survive. You can't stick to this idea of this notion that we'll look at the business and make a decision on information that's a month to 6 weeks old. You just can't survive like that anymore. And we're seeing, the bigger businesses are already moving into that immediate space, but that's the 20% of the 80% of businesses aren't mega businesses, and they're not moving fast enough. And, losing ground against your competitors is eventually terminal, no matter how you look at it.
I love the way if we don't take anything else away from this podcast, listeners, I want to encourage you to really hone in on something that Peter said just a second ago, where he talked about the cost is built into the improvements that can be made in the system. And I mean, how many people just kind of gloss over that and just literally just look at the cost of what this service is, and they don't understand that it's already built into the margins that could be improved, or the systems that could be improved, or whatever. And I really love the way that you frame that. And I think, just looking at what Biz Drivers does, I mean, we had a much longer conversation, and just listening to you kind of unpack that a little more in depth made perfect sense. And I love this kind of marriage between what Dash can provide as far as this real-time analytics, and what you do as, from a systemic improvement process. So wrap us up here. What's the best way that people can find out more about what you guys are cooking up, and who's your ideal client too?
Ideal clients. So any customer that is trying to build a resilient business, either from growth or improving their business performance. Any business that is facing a market or a customer, we can help from that perspective. And certainly, that's a whole range of companies, from merchandise companies through to professional services, through to construction companies. It really makes no difference. At the end of the day, a company is pulling much the same levers. They're trying to add some value along the way and make a profit out of adding that value, and control their processes as they do it. So, whether you're making matchsticks or building space rockets, it doesn't really make much difference. Your approach to market is quite similar. And it's those fundamentals where businesses tend to fall down. It's interesting. And
near term, Kevin, I think Dash is really focused on telephone pole companies. I think there's a big opportunity there.
Especially the inventory control of power companies. It's a perfect fit. That's exactly right. Yeah, that are not based in Tornado Alley in North Queensland. That's exactly right.
Yeah. That does wipe out a lot of the world, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. Nick, give us a takeaway which we're closing up here today.
I think that's the takeaway. I think you got to be clear on what you're doing before you make a change. That way you make sure you make the right change. But if you get a chance, definitely look up Peter Selby and Business Drivers. Amazing business. Been awesome to learn from him over these past couple months, and really glad to have you here, Peter. Thanks for coming on.
No, great to be here.
Well, Peter, thank you for joining us. And once again, it's a pleasure to share Zoom with you over a podcast, and just kind of be able to glean some wisdom from 30 plus years of experience, and even probably some things that you've done well and haven't done so well that you maybe have learned from, like we all have. But I just
Success
appreciate that.
definitely is not a straight line, that is for sure.
It is never a straight line, for sure. Never a straight line. Well, guys, it's I want to wrap it up again. And this is just another episode of Clearwater's podcast, and we're just trying to provide some clarity in an otherwise murky world. Guys, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.